Welcome to the Investor Hot Seat. In this episode, MyCureAll is in the hot seat with a distinguished panel of investor judges that are ready to turn the heat way up. Will MyCureAll gain an investor, or will they go home with some good advice? Stay tuned to find out.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Hess, President and co-founder at Tress Capital, and I'm very excited to be your MC for today, the first edition of the Investor Hot Seat. I would like to welcome everyone that has joined us today on Zoom to watch an innovative company pitch their investment opportunity to a seasoned panel of experienced investors. Raising capital is a quest for companies all around the world, and we're being joined today by a global audience of investors, industry professionals, and entrepreneurs from multiple countries, including Germany, Mexico, Australia, Colombia, Canada, the UK, here in the US, and many other countries. The Investor Hot Seat is a 1-hour webinar. Our goals are, of course, to entertain, to educate, and connect companies from different industry sectors who are seeking additional growth capital and in the hunt for new investors. Today's schedule for our webinar is as follows. From 11:05 to 11:15, we will have 10 minutes of judges introducing themselves. From 11:15 to 11:30, MyCureAll will be today's presenter in the hot seat. That will be followed by approximately 10 to 15 minutes of judges' questions. From 11:45 to 11:55, we'll get our judges' decision and feedback, followed by some of our most important participants today. You, the audience, will be joining us in voting. Would you invest in MyCureAll? A pop-up screen will show up for all of you at the end of the judge's decision and feedback, and we look forward to your participation. And then finally, we will have closing announcements, and we thank you for joining us. We do have a few other items to go over before we begin. First, if you'd like to submit a question to any of our judges or to MyCureAll, please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Please make sure that you are chatting with all panelists and attendees. Very important. All panelists and attendees should be chosen from the dropdown. After the MyCureAll presentation, you will be presented, as I mentioned, with a pop-up window where you will be able to vote. So stick around, audience. Your participation is very much wanted and very important. If you would like to learn more about the Investor Hot Seat, the presenting company, or any of our judges today, you can also log on to cannabisinvestingforum.com. That's one word, cannabisinvestingforum.com. And in the menu located at the top of the website, you'll find a tab for Investor Hot Seat dated today, July 16th. You can click on that tab and it will contain all of the information you are seeing today. Okay, let's begin. As I mentioned, my name is David Hess, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am the president and co-founder of Tress Capital, a boutique investment firm located in New York City. We manage investments and advise investors and entrepreneurs strictly dedicated to the cannabis sector. I've been an investor now for over 10 years. I am a two-time cancer survivor, which cannabis was very much a part of my survival and still plays a large part today. And I've been investing and advising in companies at Tress now, as I mentioned, for over a decade, and we're very excited to work with companies like MyCureAll and excited to see the presentation today. All of our investors are ready to listen to the MyCureAll presentation and provide their feedback. And we look forward to that. Before we begin, let me introduce our judges. The following panel of judges are all actively participating and investing in the cannabis sector. They all manage funds that invest and have a portfolio of companies, and again, both mentor as well. Let me begin by introducing David Friedman, the Chief Executive Officer of Panther Capital. David, would you like to?
Sorry about that, I was muted. You want me to introduce myself, give my background?
Please give us a little bit about your background, sure.
Sure. So, as David said, I'm the CEO of Panther Capital. I've been a venture investor and venture operator for 35 years, the last 6 of which have been exclusively in the cannabis industry. I have run a number of funds that invest in businesses, but also act as a portfolio manager and drop into a number of our portfolio companies at certain times. Early on, it was distressed assets, and then later on, it became more transactional when we were doing M&A activity or moving towards some sort of a liquidity event. I continued doing that. 6 years ago, we started the Panther Fund. We invested in about 35 companies over the first and second fund, along with my partners. I have run 2 companies in the industry in our portfolio. I'm in the process of running a third and trying to transition out and get back more towards the non-operational role, and primarily invest in ancillary companies, but most of our ancillary companies, especially on the operational side, deal with plant-touching companies. So I've got a pretty comprehensive understanding of the industry across all disciplines. My background's accounting and finance, so I tend to look at things very financially oriented, and that's sort of where I'm at.
Thank you for that introduction, David. We'll now go to another good friend of mine and colleague, Evan Enerman, sitting in Los Angeles today, founder of Sands Lane Capital. Hello, Evan. Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, David. Hi, my name is Evan Enerman, founder and managing partner of Sands Lane Capital. I've been investing in the cannabis space for the past 6 years and running various services businesses as well. Sands Lane Capital is a purpose-driven venture firm. We are focused on brands and CPG-related opportunities, in addition to ancillary and license holding companies as well. We leverage the resources that we have across our venture ecosystem, which includes our brand incubator and creative agency, Fiorello, as well as our investment bank, Elo Capital. So we think about opportunities in the industry from a 360 view, both unlocking opportunity and synergy with our portfolio companies, as well as the various clients that we have in the services businesses. So very excited to be here. As we all know, it's a very interesting industry, especially at this time, and just looking forward to the companies that are pitching today. So thank you.
Fantastic, Evan. Thank you. I'm sure you're going to have some great feedback for MyCureAll. Next, I'd like to introduce Guillermo Sepúlveda, all the way from Mexico, the founder and CEO of Gröuth Group de Mexico. Guillermo, would you like to give us a little bit about your background and what you're investing in?
Sure. I'm the president and CEO of Gröuth Group, and we are in 2 businesses. We're in the wellness business and we're in the real estate business. On the wellness business, we're part of the executive advisory board of Arcadian Fund, and also part of a private equity firm that's just starting in Mexico called the Happy Capital Fund. You like that name. In Arcadian, we have, the first fund was for $25 million, and we have about 35 companies, partners that we have invested in the cannabis business, all of them non-plant touching ancillary business. And we're in the process of raising for Arcadian Fund number 2 for $100 million to continue investing in this business. And in Mexico, Happy Capital Fund is raising $15 million. In Mexico, as you might know, it hasn't been approved legally yet at the federal level, and that was supposed to happen before the COVID. So right now we're on hold, but still beginning to raise money for that. So I'm very excited to hear what the opportunities are in this event that we're now participating in. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo. And I know I'm not alone in saying we all look forward to getting to Mexico once COVID allows. It's a beautiful country, and I know I miss it for sure. So thank you for joining us today, Guillermo. Next up, from Supercritical, we've got the co-founder and managing partner, Jay Cowie. Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. And thank you, David, and thank you, Brad, for having me today. As David mentioned, I am with Supercritical, actually 2/3 of Supercritical. I'm joined by my partner, Carrie Jordan, at today's event. Supercritical is a Chicago-based full-spectrum cannabis and hemp capital advisory services firm. We put particular emphasis on those companies, startups or existing, which bring to market a unique product set, unique ideas, not necessarily upstream or downstream, nor not necessarily plant touching, but most certainly those companies that have a social equity component to it, because that's what the investors are looking for, and that's what we need to bring to this industry.
Thank you for saying that, Jay. Social equity is definitely a hot topic today in today's world, and I really do appreciate Supercritical for bringing that and highlighting that. Next, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Finkel, CEO of ArcView Ventures. Jeffrey.
Thank you, David. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Finkel, CEO of ArcView Ventures. ArcView Ventures is the principal investing arm of the ArcView Group. Many of you may know the ArcView Group. Since 2010, some $300 million have found their way into over 200 companies through the ArcView Investor Network, probably the most prolific investor network in cannabis. ArcView recently has extended that core membership and event business to be a more fully functioning financial services firm. The first piece of which is where I'm responsible is ArcView Ventures, which is principal investing. Today, under the Ventures arm, we have our first fund. It's called the ArcView Collective Fund. It is unique in structure in that it is a member-managed venture fund, meaning our members, who are our LPs, we just refer to them as members, are also part of our general partner, and as such, vote on how the fund is run and in which companies the fund invests. We do it through a committee structure that allows us to get to yes or no in a 60-day period, and we get to leverage the wisdom of our 48 members. I think the first thing I learned in investing in cannabis is it's really hard, and it's not one thing. The industry is really 12 different distinct subsectors, all of which have very different characteristics in terms of financial efficiency, timeline to exit, capital required to get to the finish line. It's just very, very hard to be an expert in all. The member-led model gives us the ability to have members that touch most of those domains and help us just make better investment committee decisions. Further to ArcView, the third leg of the stool is that we just announced a partnership to create ArcView Capital, which is a FINRA licensed broker-dealer. Also, we'll be representing companies for fundraising and merger acquisition advisory. And lastly, I would just say, by way of personal background, I spent 18 years as an operating executive in the software industry. Started a venture capital fund in tech in 1999, a $100 million fund in New York called Odeon Capital Partners. And between Odeon and my activities at ArcView, I've been doing a lot of startup advisory assignments. So happy to be here, happy to learn about MyCureAll and give whatever opinions that I think are useful.
Thank you, Jeff. Moving on to John Bradford in LA, CEO of Collab. John will tell you a little bit about himself and one of his partners being Baron Davis. Some of you might recall his NBA fame. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to pass it off as well as Baron did to Blake in the dunk contest, but I'll do my best and pass it off to John Bradford, CEO of Collab today.
Yeah, hey guys, really happy to be here. Apologies, I'm in the car and Baron isn't able to join. We had to do some last minute moving around due to the ever-changing situation of Southern California here. But nonetheless, excited to be here and more about the activities that are going on. I've been in Los Angeles investing and advising in startups for the past 7 years. Our company Collab has had the opportunity now to be a part of 70 venture-backed businesses, with 50 of them still operating and 7 of them now successfully achieving exits. Started to focus a little bit more on cannabis a couple years ago, but have been a very active and evangelist and consumer since really the start of my career. So always excited to learn about kind of new innovations and hearing about how the industry's catching up in ways that other industries don't have the opportunity to do so as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Appreciate you joining us all the way from LA. Next, we've got another member, another third of Supercritical, as John was mentioning, a managing member, Carrie Jordan. Carrie, welcome to the Investor Hot Seat. Please introduce yourself. Carrie, you might need to unmute. There we go.
There we go. There's always someone that talks while muted, right? Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with all of you. I'm looking forward to today's session. Jay gave a great introduction about Supercritical, so I'll just focus a little bit about me and my investment experience. I have my undergraduate and graduate degrees in finance. I also sat for the Chartered Financial Analyst exam, so I'm a CFA charter holder. And I bring that lens to my investment making decision process. I've held positions at NASDAQ stock market, Bank of America. I've worked for a couple hedge funds, and most recently was the COO of a private equity firm here in Chicago before founding Supercritical with Jay and Sparky. So mostly I focused on the finance side of business as well as operational and management due diligence. So when I'm looking at companies in which to invest, those are the three areas where I spend a lot of time focusing and analyzing. I would really encourage everyone that's thinking about making investments in cannabis to do your due diligence. That will be the best time you've spent ever on making this. As a long-time socially responsible investor, I would say that for me, the cannabis landscape, and to reiterate Jay's comments earlier, that social equity component of it is critically important to me, super critical, you might say, but it really gives us a unique opportunity to provide opportunities and advantages to people in our communities that have been historically disadvantaged by over-policing and by marijuana prohibition and stringent laws. So looking forward to hearing the presentation today and getting ready to make some investments.
Thank you very much for that, Carrie. It sure is super critical. And again, thank you for highlighting the social equity and again, for all that you're doing for our industry. Last, but certainly not least, from Multiverse Capital out in Colorado, Nick Easley, CEO and Managing Director. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Nick.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Still in the COVID beard contest. And actually surprised to be back out in Colorado. This is where I started 14 years ago, originally from farm country in Wisconsin, and was a Romance language cryptolinguist for the United States Air Force for over 4 years. So speak a bunch of languages, and came out to Colorado 14 years ago as a medical patient, and really just saw the shit show of what has turned into the cannabis industry, like how it started with the first commercial programs, not just on top of the California ones. So my other company, 3C Consulting, we've worked in 34 states, 16 countries. Of those, I have positions in 13 of those countries in 21 states. So I launched Multiverse Capital about 3 years ago to have specific funds like an ancillary fund, a medical fund, and a recreational fund to actually back US investments. Now we also do a variety of SPVs, special purpose vehicles for international placements, but having had over 1,000 different clients with 3C, we have a very unique deal flow and due diligence process and access to deals that most people don't see publicly available, or positions where we might help to win a license, have 10% of the company first right of refusal, win one of the Portuguese licenses, 2 of the Danish licenses, and then all of a sudden, like some really nice positive exits with that. So very unique investment thesis focused on agriculture, product manufacturing, and the ancillary side of this business. And not just like capital is one thing, but it's the hands-on approach of nurturing those portfolio companies, managing them when new things change, helping them, how they structure, how they raise future rounds. We're really in it with our portfolios for the long term. But yeah, very much pleasure to be here with everyone today.
Thank you very much, Nick. What an impressive group of judges joining our panel today. Really diverse, really from certainly geographically diverse, joining us all the way from Mexico and from Los Angeles, Chicago, Colorado, and New York City, and everywhere in between. And of course, you, the audience, joining us globally as well is fantastic. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Elaine Richer and Jacques Neer of MyCureAll.
Okay, let me make sure I'm unmuted. Okay, how's everyone doing today? Thank you very much for having us. I really appreciate it. My name is Elaine Richer, and I am a founder of and a CEO of a company called MyCureAll. We are a healthcare technology company. And our mission is really to bring physical, social, and financial relief from the opioid epidemic and to accelerate the acceptance of legal cannabis industry into the mainstream healthcare as well as insurance system. So I've been a pharmacist for 25 years at this point. During my career upon graduation from Long Island University, I actually immediately became an owner of my own 3 different pharmacies. So I have experience as a retail pharmacist right in the beginning of that opioid epidemic when it was really affecting, when OxyContin was coming out and all that good stuff in '97. From that, I actually switched and I went to work for CVS. I worked for CVS as a pharmacist, then as a scheduler for pharmacists to make sure that we always had all the stores open, and then I became a pharmacy supervisor. I stayed with CVS for 13 years, then I moved on to Rite Aid and as a pharmacy district manager. And from Rite Aid, I moved on to Walgreens as a district manager. In my career, I've managed stores, front stores, pharmacies, as much as 39 units in the tri-state New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, having stores in Philly, having stores in northwestern PA, and northern New Jersey, obviously, as well. MyCureAll was really born from our desire to fight the opioid epidemic. Both my husband, Jacques Neer, who is going to be joining me in a couple of minutes, who is here right now, he's the CEO of the company. We really wanted to help fight the opioid epidemic, and we found that cannabis is really a great treatment option for a lot of people. And that's kind of how we arrived to MyCureAll. So I left my position as a district manager in Walgreens as of January 1st, 2019, and I became the first full-time employee of this company. Chad?
Afternoon, everybody. I attended Columbia University. I'm also an adjunct professor there now. I have 25 years as a social worker in LCSW in New York City, and I'm currently director of a mental health clinic up in the Bronx. I have about 1,200 clients and 25 different employees working for me, and we've all gone virtually at this point. So that story in its own right is kind of astonishing because we moved the entire clinic to a virtual existence. And that's all our clients, that's all the billing process, that's all the medical services, and everyone's receiving services. And I actually onboarded 8 people in the last couple of months. So no one was furloughed, no one's lost their job, and we keep everyone interactive, right? We have all these new platforms and a wonderful way of communicating in that great environment. A lot of this in dealing with the opiate epidemic, I want really to focus on COVID-19 and what's occurred. And one of the bigger spikes that's actually happened is not just the fact that we're looking at opiate abuse and overdoses, but you're looking at a triage, a multitude of different psychiatric problems that are qualifying conditions for medicinal cannabis that have also really hit what's going on in the world. And we talk about even social injustice. When you hear about the WAP today, pay attention to how we are triggering into the sense of our environment people that have not used medicinal cannabis in the past. That really we need to get into the system to show that it is a legitimate medication for them, that it's something can be viable, and they don't have to hide it anymore. They don't have to use this from their dealer. They can actually get into our system and find out what works for them. Right?
So MyCureAll has built a revolutionary patent-pending HIPAA-compliant platform. Our web app platform collects protocol information for cannabis, as well as our marketed CBD line for pharmacy or pharmacy-approved product. Our management team is comprised of pharmacists, medical professionals, substance abuse and mental health professionals that really bring that true clinical extensive expertise to the medical cannabis field.
We talk about medicinal cannabis, and we know that within the scientific community, it's been known and researched to be a medication of choice. But what protocols are used? How do we know legitimately what's prescribed to patients and clients out there for medical or psychiatric concerns? How does a client, and let's go in the shoes of a client, how does that client ever know that they're going to get the same strain, the same CBD, THC, and other cannabinoid and terpenes that affected them in the first place or appropriately cared for them? How is the medical profession ever going to know what strains or recommend appropriate dosing, appropriate strains that have helped their clients in the past? How do dispensaries, once they have an influx of different strains and different product, control that product and control their inventory? We talk about medication-assisted treatment, and we talk about research studies, and we talk about being a supplementary medication-assisted treatment for clients. How do we know what specialists should recommend? How do we know how that works? Taking just one of the qualifying conditions and examining it closer, the opiate epidemic is actually between 1999 and 2017 has killed 400,000 people. The annual deaths from opiate overdose are projected to reach nearly 82,000 by 2025, excuse me. When you talk about NIH and NIH's studies and understanding that $600 billion are spent per year on substance abuse costs.
So we quickly realized that we should focus on a platform for medical cannabis, but not just focus on the opioid and substance use disorders, but really focus on all the medical disorders where cannabis can be of help. So our app enables patients, physicians, dispensaries, and insurance companies to work hand in hand to achieve a natural solution to a plethora of medical conditions. Through our patent-pending technologies, Canna-Meter and Canna-Measure, doctors are able to identify and recommend specific strains of CBD products, cannabinoids, for qualifying conditions and presenting symptoms. Dispensaries able to better manage inventory of various cannabis strains while providing effective care based on patient needs. As a matter of fact, we are currently testing the beta version of our app in several dispensaries in Pennsylvania. Insurance companies are saving money by reimbursing for medical cannabis versus paying for opioids and associated costs via treatment plans that are empowered to reduce symptoms and increase functioning in society. And the biggest winners are obviously patients who will be receiving the correct strain and strengths for their medical condition, allowing for safer and more effective treatment, and to actively participate in their wellness through targeted and consistent treatment plans. Our app regularly checks in with patients to track, analyze, and guide treatment.
Let's talk about that patent-pending technology that we have in the Canna-Measure. So we got a system, and you're a client, you come in, you're trying to use our app, and the first thing you'll do is actually enter in the information about your cannabis, what type you're using, and also all the cannabinoid properties and terpenes. You then have an interactive way of choosing your qualifying condition, and then choosing 3 symptoms that are most detrimental to you and that you want some help with. And these things really, and these qualifying conditions stand out to you. You then actually go back in, you indicate all this, and you take you use your medicinal cannabis, and then you use the measure. And after the measure, you then record the results of that, right? Anything the system records as a 15% or greater result on that will be recorded and kept in the system. And this is now keeping all the properties of that qualifying condition, all the terpenes, and even the strain in which you bought it from with the dispensary number attached to it. So the next one, if you look at the Canna-Meter process, is really for the recommender. And this is very revolutionary at the time because it allows the recommender to have a platform to recommend certain strains and to have those strains that they can give to the particular client. It is based on CBD and THC profiles. And when they get those CBD and THC profiles, they're able to match the exact strain that holds that Now, right now, it's only measuring on CBD THC, but it has all the other cannabinoid properties in there, right? The other thing, and the baseline behind this, in the patent pending technology, is 357 meta-analysis studies that are within the research data to calculate and give an algorithm that really helps the doctor, right? It's also going to be used by the dispensary, as noted. A point for note, this is all based on a HIPAA platform and is a full EMR.
So currently, we as founding members are taking care of day-to-day operations. Obviously, we have a lot of compliance and legal issues, make sure that we pre-address. So I, as the CEO, address most of them. We have attorneys on our team with experience in insurance regulations, life and health, property, casualty, general corporate litigation, obviously tech and IP management, cybersecurity. We have global healthcare professionals with us that demonstrate success planning, managing, and monitoring U.S. government, state, city, and private health system strengthening for HIV, AIDS, and TB health programs. Everybody on this call is aware of the market opportunity in cannabis world. The sales are expected to more than quintuple to 41 billion by 2025. The CBD market size has been valued by $3 billion in 2018 and is expected to grow to 22 billion by 2026. And obviously, the non-opioid pain treatment market is growing tremendously. And I really hope that everybody also understands that just from what's going on with COVID-19 and the inflammation that COVID is causing in people that are sick with it, CBD and cannabis are actually going to be great products to help and alleviate that inflammation as well.
So with the sales process, flip the screen. As you mentioned before, we are connected to the Department of Health and also Department of Insurance. There are 33 states, DC, and a number of territories that already offer medicinal cannabis. When it's legal on a federal level, it's going to have a new unfolding process where insurance companies will want to actively be involved so that we can treat clients and help them remedy their conditions. We're talking about MyCureAll app and what we have to really optimize. And I want to talk about SEOs and CRMs, which we're heavily invested. At this point, MyCureAll has actually accrued about 300,000 emails, and that we are trying to build up that distribution base. So this speaks for itself in its own right.
So our revenue model right now is based on subscription as well as targeted medical marketing. Our calculations for the 5-year projections provided that only 33 states remain medical cannabis legal and that we capture only 10% of the market. We're expecting our EBITDA to be at almost $53 million by 2025. Obviously, with the political, medical, economic projections, we feel very strongly that cannabis will be medically legal in every state in the nation within the next few years. We also are very proud of our pharmacist-approved CBD arm, and our projections for that CBD arm of the business are expected to reach EBITDA close to $12 million by 2022. We realize that we have competition in the market, Leafly, Relief, Strain Print, but we also realize that we have a great competitive differentiator. First of all, we offer standardized set of protocols, and we are the only ones out there that are offering that. We're also streamlining the recommendation process, and then we're offering the assessment tools, which are self as well as recommender assigned. So a patient can take it just because they feel the need to take it, or a physician can actually prescribe it. So it's PHQ-9, RODS, GAD, and for PTSD. And because of creation of these assessment tools, we're then able to create an insurance claim that can be shown to an insurance company. So we're currently raising $2 million. We're planning to use the money for marketing and sales, software development, as well as further operations.
when you're talking about exit strategy, we're looking at acquisition, financial buyers, investors, and IPOs. We want to develop diversion. We want this. This is our project. This is something we love. We want to keep it in the family. We want to make sure it stays with us. We're looking at telemedicine and teletherapy, bringing and expanding that field, expanding our service to the global market, electronic prescribing system for cannabis, sales of data, insurance companies, alignment. We can bring those clients in. Elaine talked about in relation to the assessment tools. Those are for those clients that have never gotten the system before, that don't realize that they're self-medicating and can get compensated and find this to be a legal version of medicine. MTM, medication therapy management, growth of targeted medical advertising, and of course aligning with social services because it's an encompassing EMR. We even have notes for the doctors. If you look at our team, which is a great team comprised, we are proud of a diverse and multidisciplinary team. They're wonderful people who bring in their talent and excellent gifts. Danny, our MIS director, is here today. We just give a shout out to Danny for helping us and making sure we had no technical glitches at this event. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time with this and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Elaine and Jacques of MyCureAll. That was an excellent presentation. And now on to our judges' feedback and advice. First,
I'll kick it off, David.
Sure, go ahead, Jay.
So first of all, to Elaine and Jacques, thank you very much for the presentation and any effort that goes into reducing the opiate crisis, addiction, and scourge that it's become should be applauded. So thank you for putting your focus into that. You did touch upon something very early. I think it was Jacques, you mentioned that in cannabis, there are brands. There's not a whole lot of standardization. In fact, there's more randomization when it comes to cannabis strains. It is not a Tylenol comparison. So how many, when you do a data aggregate sweep of the strains that go into the software, what sort of data set are you looking at? How broad do you change that over a course of time?
So the data that we've collected was from different studies that analyzed strains, and there were 357 meta-analysis studies. And those strains in particular were connected to forms of different cannabinoid properties. The other within the system, and those that are connected to the particular dispensaries, those dispensaries have strain names, right? And that's part of where we calculate that data. We want to be able to match it up and make sure that those strains are particular for a client. The biggest thing is that by identifying the qualifying condition, and the recommender by the qualifying condition tracks the CBD THC and will reproduce that number for all strains that match it. I hope that answered your question, because there's a lot to it.
Thank you.
At this point, I actually just want to add one thing. So every dispensary that operates in a state actually has to submit what CBD THC ratios they are dispensing, what they'll be selling. So for example, if we take the state of New Jersey, which is extremely limited, and each dispensary maybe could carry 6 or 7 strains, and we have a total of 8 dispensaries now in the entire state of close to 10 million people, there's actually about 150 strains that have been submitted by the aggregate of these dispensaries to the Board of Health and to the Department of Health so they can be approved. So what we are offering is actually an interchangeable. So you're absolutely right. If I don't have Tylenol, I'm going to recommend acetaminophen. So that's exactly the point of our app. And we're coming, I'm a pharmacist, we're coming to this exactly from that pharmaceutical standpoint, is that the correct product, it can be called Pineapple Express or Midnight Express, but it's still going to have the same ratios that the patient needs.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Jay, for that great question. I want to remind our judges on the panel that what we're also looking for today, if you're comfortable, of course, is to give us an indication of an interest. Were there particular areas of the pitch and opportunity that you liked? Were there some areas that you'd like to give Jacques and Elaine feedback on? And best case scenario, are you ready to invest?
I have my hand up. I don't know if I'm supposed to be called on or not, or if I can just chime in.
Go for it, Jeff.
I'm waiting patiently. It's like I'm back in elementary school.
Go for it.
So thank you, guys. So just a couple of clarification questions. You know, I'm not 100% clear on the business model and where the revenue streams come from. I understand certainly you're marketing your own product, so that's part of it. I don't know if people are paying a user fee or if participating brands and dispensaries are paying a fee to you. It's not clear yet to me if you're a tech community, if you're selling software, or if you're a brand. So maybe just give us a little clarity in that. I guess at the end, I do have some comments on the presentation, but let's learn more first. At the very end, I'm happy to share my views there.
So we're working on a subscription model for the patient, the client. I want to emphasize that it's free. It is meant to be used by the population so that they feel comfortable with medicinal cannabis. But the subscription is for the doctors or prescribers rather, and also the dispensaries. There's also within this element, once you start developing a sense of having a prescriber and doctors and different dispensaries and hopefully hospitals at some point, that you can do targeted marketing as well, right, within the system itself. So when you have the targeted marketing, there's a much higher revenue adjusted for that.
So by targeted marketing, we mean is that when the patient enters our ecosystem and when the patient, understands that, okay, now I'm going to be going through cancer treatment, I need to choose the right CBD or cannabis strain for myself. I will be doing it in this hospital. I will be, utilizing this parking space. I will be needing to go to this restaurant to pick up lunch, or my family members are staying with me. You can actually target the patient on exactly what their needs are. And then you go further, and we've been talking to some pharma companies to the point, so now the patient turned 50 years old. So now we're gonna wish him a happy birthday and also tell him that he really needs to get the Shingrix vaccine, because shingles is a serious possibility after you turn 50. So there's really very specific targeted marketing that we're looking forward to. And then obviously we're growing our recommender platform, and we're planning on going to telemedicine, which is why we need that operation money so we can, transition smoothly, remaining HIPAA compliant and answering all the insurance regulations.
One other component that we don't talk about as of yet, because we obviously it's not federally legal, and we have concerns where the insurance companies might stand. But insurance companies aligning with us, that could be a great relationship for them down the road. And how that looks financially it needs to be determined. But that still has a big component that could later be recognized.
So just quick follow-up. It's not even really a follow-up, but it's related. How far along are you? As a company launch, do you have a user community? Do you have brands on? Give us a sense for how long you are.
Answering questions. Okay, so we are currently testing. So we're currently testing in the dispensaries. We've been testing with physicians and patients since September. So we've actually, even before we built our web app, we've actually been testing since September, because physicians are very interested in the product that we're providing. They are, the protocols are very important to them, and they're really not being taught medicinal cannabis or endocannabinoid system in medical school. So we're providing that to them so they can actually work with the patients, and I know everybody here is from different places, but on the East Coast, we have very few recommenders of medicinal cannabis, simply because they do not feel comfortable recommending the product, which is why we moved on from just having physicians able to prescribe to actually having now nurse practitioners and physician assistants that have the right to do so. But again, that population isn't growing. So what we're offering to them And again, their fee is only $89 per month, and we have tested and retested that with different physicians, is to join the platform. I hope I answered the question.
So are you actually generating revenue yet?
No, we've been testing, and we have not been generating revenue yet. We're completely offering the platform for free at this time, and we're planning to go, we're really planning on starting generating revenue and gathering those fees as of probably the fourth quarter of 2020.
Thank you very much. That was David Friedman of Panther Capital. David, do you have any further questions and feedback?
I do, but I'm going to hold off. I'll let other people, more feedback than question. Well, I guess I have one more question. Who's your competition right now? And then I'll turn it back over to others for questions. I'll save my feedback. I guess you probably want to do a round robin at the end on feedback or something.
Yeah, thank you, David. And that's actually a great question. And some of those in the audience in the chat have asked the same question. So can you give us a little bit about your competitors and what your sustainable value that you're creating beyond the offering?
So as far as protocols are concerned, specifically medical protocols, we're the only ones that are offering those medical protocols. We also have assessment tools built into the system, which I discussed, assessment tool for PTSD, because again, people that are using cannabis, even if they feel that they're not using it for a medical reason, they are using to alleviate some sort of a problem. We're also looking for that insurance coverage, and we're showing our treatment plan actually shows the amount of money that the insurance company saves paying for cannabis versus paying for OxyContin, and then for whatever side effects that OxyContin brings, be that having to enter a rehab or just severe constipation. So just from that standpoint, we're clearly offering that. And at this point, between US and Canada and Israel and Germany, which are pretty much the only 4 companies that are really like on the forefront of research and study, not US, but we are US, we're the only ones that are offering that specific ability. We're the only ones that are pharmacists that are building protocols based on what our social service directors are telling us to do, and we're reaching to that patient.
But there are competitors. I mean, there is competition. Leafly, Relief,
Strain Print,
right, are out there. But we did a nice diagram on one of the slides, which actually shows for everything out there, we are the least expensive and more encompassing.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
You've made several references to insurance and being able to bill to insurance and having doctors actually prescribe, but we're still a ways off from that happening in real life. So going back to your slide on your revenue models, where are you expecting to get the bulk of your revenue in the near term while we're still waiting for those opportunities to come to fruition? So if I'm an investor, I want to know how you're going to be able to cash flow this business going forward and continue to scale and grow absent any regulatory changes. And right now, I don't have a good understanding of how you're going to do that.
So right now, the money will be made just from the dispensary paying their monthly fees, as well as from the physicians paying their monthly fees. We've been very successful in getting coverage for our patients offline. It has not been done electronically, that I'm going to tell you, but I can also assure you that insurance companies are covering cannabis for their patients, as well as all the workers' compensation programs out there in the state where medical cannabis is legal, also covering. And this case just went to Supreme Court and in March, and Supreme Court in the state of New Jersey specifically went with the patient and had his workers' comp program pay off all his cannabis debt going back to 2013, simply because it is medically legal. But right now, we're just looking on collecting fees from dispensaries as well as from the recommenders, which would be physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants.
And to put a little note on that, like the sense of prescribers wanting some clarification and some sense of backup certainty in what they're doing, this offers that, as well as sending out the PTSD check, the PHQ-9 for depression, letting them know that the clients are aligned with services or might need help in the community. But allowing that security for the prescriber, saying that, okay, whatever I am doing, it's not just a shot in the dark. I'm actually using a protocol and system that has reliability to it.
Thank you, Jacques, and thank you, Carrie, for that great question. Next, we're going to go to Evan Enerman, founder of Sands Lane Capital.
Hey guys, really interesting approach, and I like what you guys are trying to solve for. Obviously, you're also trying to do a lot right now, which might be a challenge going forward. The question I want to understand better, you talk about your protocols not being the differentiator. What are those protocols based on? Is there research, scientific study? Is it the physicians or recommenders that you're crowdsourcing protocols from? Where is that coming from?
So we currently have 357 meta-analysis studies in our system. These are actually been tested not only, not only by the researchers that publish them. We're actually working with different medical school and institution to retest and make sure that we're providing a proper protocol for a patient depending on their medical condition. So there are studies out there. We're doing more studies. We actually have interns from different pharmacy schools that are helping us out. And prior to COVID, we were beginning a study with the Rutgers Medical School and University Hospital here in New Jersey, and with William Patterson University, with their Cannabis Institute, to actually verify every study. So we do have a lot of science behind it.
And the other part I'm just going to add, because being very client-centered, on the Canna-Meter, the Canna-Measure goes into the Canna-Meter as well. So all the data we calculate from there with the 15% or greater showing improvement is actually part of the algorithm for the Canna-Meter as well. So it shows that individual process and progress, allowing us to get real-time data.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So like I said, I like what I'm hearing. I'd love to learn more. In full disclosure, I'm invested into a cannabis telemedicine platform that may or may not compete, just because I don't really understand the business entirely. But I definitely would love to hear more about it.
We'd love to talk about it.
Fantastic. Next, I'd like to hear from Guillermo Sepúlveda from Gröuth Group de Mexico. Guillermo.
Hi. I guess from Arcadian's perspective, we invest in companies that are close to a break-even point or at a break-even point. My concern would be the fact that I don't have a sense of financially where the company is. I understand what they're trying to do and what their offer is, but for Arcadian, I think it would be difficult to invest in a company that hasn't shown any record of financial performance. I guess it doesn't have to be profitable, but it needs to have a path of profitability, and I'm not clear where that is right now. I think it's it would be a challenge for me to recommend that to the investment board of Arcadian. So I would need to see more what the financial plan is to achieve profitability and where those revenues are coming from, like Carrie was mentioning.
Thank you, Guillermo. Part of today's discussion is exactly this. We want MyCureAll and the entrepreneurs joining us today on Zoom to understand the thinking process, right? When we're listening to these pitches. Not every entrepreneur, not every opportunity is suitable for every investor, and not every investor is suitable for every opportunity. And a little bit later, and I do apologize, we're approaching the 1 hour mark, and we're obviously going to go a little bit over. And again, I do apologize for that, but I almost don't apologize, because this is such a great panel, such a great company presenting today, such a great platform. And it's just really exciting. And again, thank you everybody for hanging in there a little longer than what was originally promised the platform would be. But again, we really want the investors to, you know, again, as honestly as possible, which you're seeing today, to give their feedback once our questions are done to our investors. We have another investor that I'd like to hear back from in terms of questions. That's Nick Easley, the Managing Director and CEO of Multiverse Capital. Nick, do you have any questions for Elaine and Jacques?
I got a couple here, and you know, definitely, I mean, disabled vet myself, and you know as well, like from Tress, from your background, it's different when you know this plant is medicine. Problems are when something's federally illegal and legal in states, and then when I hear things about treatment plans and risks and liabilities or prescriptions, I think Germany, I think my insurance, the things that are in there. So I like the vision for where this can go, kind of like I mentioned in the past. I always think I'm like a risk profile. If we're getting, even if I see a market opening up, how do I get into that market without exposing myself to the risk and liability of potential, you know, false health claims, or, you know, you're one of like the only out of like Strain Print or Leafly or anyone that would have like the HIPAA side. You know, my question's just kind of again on like revenue streams. And you know, we do early stage companies revenue at all, and growth equity. You had mentioned in the past having like CBD line type products, doctors paying for this, dispensaries paying for this. I think at one point, can you just clarify, was it you expected to get 10% of the market share of certain dispensaries or doctors making recommendations? Was that correct?
We're looking for the 10% of the share market, actually, of the patients. When the numbers that we were showing, the calculations we were showing, was actually 10% of the patient market, which when we showed, because again, there's a lot of regulations involved, as obviously you mentioned, and coming with my background, I am very, very big on risk analysis. And if you get a chance to review our business plan, we probably have a good 5-6 pages that are addressing all the risk in the market. But just based on the 4 states that we're looking at, where we received total clearance to operate in, and to offer our feedback and to give those protocols and recommendations, because we can't say the word prescription, being that it's not federally legal, we were looking at close to 25 million patients based on calculations pre-COVID. And as I mentioned, with COVID, there's going to be a very large increase in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's population, has been after the Spanish flu. So there's going to be a lot more inflammation that will need to be treated. And I do understand, and both Jacques and I understand, we are very medical. So far, we've put in $300,000 of our own money. We do have some angel investors. All the investors that we had so far are physicians. And the reason they're investing is because those physicians that invested in us now became part of the medicinal marijuana program. Prior to us, they weren't, because they didn't feel comfortable. And they're all in that area of practice where their patients would benefit from cannabis or CBD. So because of talking with me as a pharmacist, one of the physicians, which is how the company was born, who is very specific to treating endometriosis, actually brought us a check and invested in us because we were offering that opportunity to her.
Well, yeah, it's just whenever I hear that treat word, and I see the long-term upside of this, even anticipating 10% of a market share. I'm in states with major products that we don't even get 10% with the best marketing and branding and consumer focusing packaged goods. But I do think like there's value in this. There's certain risk profiles, which I'll kind of leave on the separate side. But when you think about what the risks are, what the upside is, what other revenue streams might be available. And just one thing I just kind of mentioned to look at, like when you think about 150 strains or other THC, CBD that we have a couple hundred known cannabinoids, when I think about certificate of analysis or how to avoid a potential, no offense, phylos or something, I can't trust 90% of strain names in most states. And then,
100%.
yeah, so it's like, how do we, advocacy standpoint, like how do you kind of address some of these problems while not pushing people away? It's like, oh, the truth, negative Nancy's. But there's definitely could be some value here. But like I said, anytime we're getting towards pharmaceutical prescription, treatments, medical, here in Colorado, we had maybe max 130,000 patients. When adult youth, we're down to like 80,000 now. Most do it as like a Costco membership. And even as a disabled vet, I still push for that medical side. I just see a lot of states going faster from medical to adult use based on COVID. And I'm wondering how to create a couple new revenue streams as part of this, to like make it a little bit more attractive.
So a couple of things I can tell you. For example, when Illinois went from medical to recreational, their increase in their medical cannabis program increased by 35%. And that was by middle of February.
There's
So
not enough products for adult use to actually satiate the demand. So it's a way people can get cheaper product and access there, and they have all qualifying conditions. So
exactly. So, but that's what we're looking at, because, for example, in New Jersey, as of July 1st, they started dropping taxes, the tax for medical cannabis patients. And in November, we're really expecting that this is going to be voted as for adult use. But now the medical cannabis patient is going to pay less. So, of course, you will have more patients that want to use it medically. And again, as I've mentioned before, I feel very strongly that even if people don't realize that they're using it for a condition or for a medical reason, they do, which is why we have those assessments for the patients, for the patients to use it.
Super. Well, thank you.
And by the way, I just want to make sure, because we spent some time explaining the Canna-Meter and our patent pending technology. What our Canna-Meter does do, if you move from Colorado to New Jersey or from California to New York, we will tell you what is the strain you should be using in New York if you're going from dispensary A to dispensary B. We will, based on those CBD, THC ratios, we're working on terpenes now, which is what we're looking for to raise money for our version 2. So all of that is going to be, is being given to the patient now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elaine and Jacques and Nick, for that great question. I want to remind all our participants, when asking questions in the chat, please make sure you are addressing them to all panelists and attendees. I'm seeing some great questions to both the attendees and our panelists today, and I just want to make sure everybody is getting to see those. And do we have any questions before we get into the judges' feedback, at which point we're going to go ahead and, as David mentioned, we're going to go around the horn. We're going to do so alphabetically. We'll start with David Friedman and we'll end with Nick. So we're doing first name alphabetically. But before we do that, does anybody have any other questions that I missed? Fantastic. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some of the feedback. I know some of the judges already started giving some of that feedback. David Friedman, Chief Executive Officer of Panther Capital in Chicago. Can you please give MyCureAll, Elaine, and Jacques your feedback?
Sure, yeah. So, overall, well presented in terms of, your command of your information. I'd say that I'll qualify my feedback with, the comment that we also don't invest in startup companies. We're primarily investing in companies that have shown some traction, that have some revenue. Traction doesn't always mean revenue. They don't have to be EBITDA positive or even necessarily close to EBITDA positive, especially in the technology space. But the ability to demonstrate that you have more than an idea has to be something that somebody's willing to pay for, is a core tenet of our investment criteria. So you wouldn't qualify, but I don't think that precludes me from giving you some feedback. So there's a couple of things that I would say to you. One is, I don't really think that you understand your market as well as you need to. anytime somebody says to me that when I asked about competition and they can't name competitors, when they just tell me that, you're the only one that does this and that and the other thing, that's a real red flag for me. I happen to know several competitors, and I know that there's at least 2 other people on this call who've invested in one along with me. I think actually they could be a potential partner for you. They have demonstrated traction. They have revenue that's in excess of, last time I checked, it was in excess of $1 million a year in ARR, and that was pre-COVID, which launched them into the stratosphere to some extent. They have a different revenue model in terms of who they're charging and how they're charging. I think the notion of a recommendation engine, whether it's a personal one or an algorithmic one, is a great idea, but it's an idea that I think is ahead of its time. I think you're going to need a lot more traction and activity on the platform before you can get to a point where those recommendations are going to be valuable to anybody. But somebody like them might, be a potential partner since they already have that traction. I'm not going to say their name on here because the last thing I want to do is distract from your presentation. But those are sort of my general feedback. I mean, I think you guys are very intelligent in the pharmaceutical, pharmacy, non-cannabis side of things. You have good ideas, but I think you need a little bit more market research on the cannabis industry and who's doing what and how you're looking to monetize this product before you're ready for investment, in my opinion.
Thank you, David. And to note, I know David, just like, and Panther Capital, just like us at Tress, what we'll do is we'll follow opportunities at the early stage when it's too early for us to invest. As David mentioned, if the traction is we're still waiting for a little bit traction. Again, that traction can be both monetary and otherwise, right? And so
yep, absolutely.
What we'll do is we'll follow those companies, right, David? And we'll wait until potentially we are ready to invest. And so don't take that MyCureAll as, as a negative, right? David's provided some, and I'm not saying you are, but for anybody out there that gets this kind of feedback, really hoping for a yes, great investor like David, great group like Panther, a no comes with feedback a lot of the times from these great groups. And the feedback is often so important for our entrepreneurs, and thank you for that honest feedback, David. Next, I'd like to go to Evan Enerman, our founder at Sands Lane. Evan, can you provide us with some feedback today?
Yeah, again, I think overall, great ideas, great presentation, a lot of data and time spent putting this together. So there's a lot of opportunity, and to David's point, some great ideas, and the challenges are going to be operationalizing them, monetizing them, with obviously the goal of eradicating, or as much as possible minimizing, the opioid epidemic that we face today and will continue for some time. For me, the most important part at this stage is being hyper focused, and I do think you guys are trying to tackle a lot. You need to do a lot, and obviously to do what you're intending to do, we're really trying to narrow down and build that model for traction, because once you have that, you can then expand beyond that. To David's point, one of the investments that I'm in, I think there might be ways to partner. I can't really tell if you're competitive or not, and what your long-term strategy is. So that's something to consider when you're presenting. Try and have a very focused initiative. Your bigger plans could be, a little bit grandiose, but certainly how you're going to get there should be very focused. And then just the last part to that is, I think you have a lot of great input from your colleagues and your experience. And, I like risk. I like to invest earlier as much as I look at things on the growth stage and advise companies on the growth stage and mature companies as well. The main thing that I and many others look for is investing is not necessarily the idea itself, but the team behind it. And you guys have incredible expertise that is highly relevant to what you're doing now in this market in particular, and where this market is going. And then obviously Nick mentioned we're kind of a little bit of ahead of ourselves in the US around legalization and things we can and cannot do. And someone else mentioned, I forget, around monetization today is critical. So I would say keep at it. Let's refine down what the next steps are. But like I said, I'm interested to talk more and see where there might be a good fit. So thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Next, we're going to hear from Guillermo. Guillermo Sepúlveda, founder and CEO of the Gröuth Group to Mexico and advisor. Please go ahead and give us some feedback today.
Well, first of all, congratulations to Elaine and Jack. I know how difficult it is to start something and to be an entrepreneur. It is so. I kudos for that. My comment is I don't know where the revenue is going to be coming from. So I think for investors, you need to be a little bit more. Provide more analysis on financials. I didn't see a lot of that. I mean, you talked a lot about the potential of the market and what the opportunity is, but I think you need to show some track record of how you are beginning to raise that money, or you plan to get those revenues. When you start doing that, like David said, you don't need to be profitable right now or close to profitability, but you need to demonstrate what the path is to get to that eventually. So my advice would be to work on that and to have a clear financial model of what investors are going to be getting for their investment.
Thank you, Guillermo. Next, we'll hear from Jay Cowie, co-founder and managing partner at Supercritical, and then we'll hear from Jeff Finkel after that.
Yeah, Guillermo hit it right on the head. The investors need to know what's in it for them. Now, you guys certainly have all the chops with your background coming from pharmacy or pharmaceutical, so I know you can make it work. And again, kudos, it bears repeating that you're taking on a tremendous challenge. You're trying to fix a problem out there. So hats off to you. It does feel early stage, and as an investor, the thing that kind of flags for me and would flag for our clients is something that both Nick and Carrie talked about, and that's the just be careful around HIPAA claims or the employer claims, because what kind of flagged for me was for a multi-state operation that has an HR department in one state, are they bound to the cannabis rules of that state if employees are working in another multi-state location in California or cannabis-friendly states? Because we all know that this industry could stop with a phone call, right? So it may be legal at the state level, but all it would take is a phone call, and this whole industry could come to a crashing halt. So I would just be careful about making employer claims or HIPAA claims unless they're very backable.
Well, our HIPAA is definitely very, very backable. That I can assure you. And the employers that we've been working with, which obviously have been limited. But I understand what you're saying. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Just to that note a little bit is that I'm HIPAA trained and I remain HIPAA compliant with an OMH and OASIS format. And Elaine does that in the pharmaceutical world as well. It's a high priority for both of us.
Thank you, Jay. Next, we're going to hear from Jeff Finkel, CEO of ArcView Ventures, who knows a thing or two about startups. Jeff?
So I'm going to break down my comments into three areas, right? So the first is regarding stage. So from our perspective, and I think this echoes the sentiment of a number of investors that are kind of saying you're too early, is that the way we look at the world is there's the period of time pre-data, right? Data that comes back from users and length of sales cycle and methods of customer acquisition inform investors that through time and iteration, you'll get to that magic product market fit stage. Pre-data, which is really where you are, you've got some research, but pre-data is really pre-seed. And pre-seed means it's a bet on you because it's not a bet on data that implies transition to product market fit. That's why pre-seed deals are usually friends and family. So what you're really hearing is that we need some data, whether that's usage patterns, whether that's early revenue, which sort of tests the business model, for true seed investors to engage. And we're seed investors, but you're a little sort of behind sort of that data. Second comment would just be about the presentation. This is just a nit for me. Others may not feel this way, but I am not a fan of the back and forth presenters. One para, next slide. To me, there's a dominant presenter, it's the CEO, and then the rest of the team is there to do color commentary. But back and forth doesn't project the strength that you want to project. I'd say most of my comments are around the deck, and I think you can see from a lot of the comments, we didn't really get it. We didn't really get the business model, the pricing model, the unit economics. So all that business model stuff wasn't done. So our questions were all about getting data, not to dive deeper on what we heard, but it's just to continually level set so that we know what it is. A couple of very specific areas quickly. Market opportunity wasn't a real TAM analysis. You talked about the size of the cannabis industry, not your unit economics, not your unit price per sale times your average selling price to ground up. So I don't know how big it can be. I don't know if an 8 million pre is right, if you're gonna have to raise 2 more rounds, and can I exit at a venture capital rate of return? I don't know, because I don't know how big it is. And so you did have something about numbers, but you didn't have a unit price. So in that second slide, I couldn't sort of get to that. Market strategy slide, I don't think you showed it here, but it was on the deck that was presented before. Just was a list of everything in the marketing toolkit. It was just a list of everything anyone could ever consider. It wasn't strategy, it was just a list of stuff. So that didn't look great. The competition grid was more or less features and more or less expensive. It's not really a good axis to really position you in the upper quartile. Funding history was missed. So I wonder, what did you raise at what pre-post when? How much progress did you make? And then I would say the last thing that you really do need to improve is that in your financial model, in year 3, I think it was year 3, you showed your app revenue with a 91% EBITDA margin. That has never happened in the history of tech. So what happens is you get the runaway Excel model where you don't think about what the real expenses are going to be needed to run the business. So I think you need to have that model looked over pretty seriously, because that has just never happened. So it's just not, nobody believes what is on the forecast anyway, but you have to it has to feel thoughtful. So I would try to correct all of those things, and then you can probably leverage yourself to a better conversation with investors, because they're not kind of parsing through all that stuff and putting the pieces together.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Greatly appreciate that, Vidak. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeff. As you can tell, this is the investor hot seat, and the investors are bringing the heat today, and we do appreciate it. I mean, first and foremost, we want to ensure that investors and operators are supported properly in this space, and everybody on this panel is dedicated to doing so and showing us how they're doing that today. Next, we're going to go to Carrie Jordan, Managing Partner and of Supercritical. Carrie?
Hi, thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear your pitch and answer questions. At this time, I would not invest, and very specifically, here's why. You make a lot of statements that come across as assumptions and generalizations, and I think that you need to really lock down on your facts and your data. Jeffrey spoke about this too, but you need a lot more data. And right now it kind of feels like, well, it could go this way, and we're hopeful it'll be like this. But as someone that would be giving you money, I'm not ready to do that. I'm not going to be investing in the hope. Secondly, I was confused about who you are. Are you a technology company? Are you CPG? Are you a hybrid? It wasn't really clear. And when you had the introduction of your branded products come in with the app, to me, that was just too much. Be one or the other. Get laser focused on what you do and what you do really well. And to me, that sounds more like the pharma side and getting into the medical community. And then thirdly, I really would encourage you to get the pitch straight. Also similar to what Jeffrey said, it was distracting to hear you go back and forth, and it didn't flow all that well. Although you both come across as very bright, knowing what you know. I think that the form and the flow can be improved if you just have one person do the presentation and continue to go through the slides in an order that you're just hitting the highlights. In this presentation that we saw, you skipped a lot of slides and you were looking around, but going forward, if you're making pitches, just lock it down to the 10 most important ones. And for me, that would be how you're going to do the segmentation, what the revenue model is, how you're going to market and brand it. You do have a great team, and that side was appreciated, but just get super locked in on the most important things that a potential investor will want to hear, and will be able to make a decision based on that.
Thank you for your feedback.
Great points, Gary. I think some of our audience members in the chat were kind of saying some of the same thing, that they'd like to see a little bit more focus on the opportunity, and weren't quite sure where the focus was, if it was on the CPG side, if it was on the medical side, on the pharma side. And so a little bit more of a focused pitch would probably be best. Next, we're going to go to Nick Easley, the Managing Director and CEO of Multiverse Capital. And once Nick has given us his feedback, we're going to bring in some additional audience participation, some of my personal favorite part of today's platform. We're going to find out what you thought as the audience of today's pitch. So be on the lookout for that pop-up. Nick, you're next.
Super. Thanks again, everybody, for the opportunity, and really good pitch. I think these sorts of innovative platforms that are ancillary, that can deal with helping patients get access to quality, affordable, safe, consistent medicine are vital. How we do that and minimize risk, very, very important. My biggest feedbacks, I think that the revenue streams need to be diversified. Anytime you're getting into like CBD type products, there's so many fraudulent products there, it's hard to differentiate. I know that it could sound like a great revenue addition, but there's a lot of risk with that, like where those are made, who those make, and that could create a whole liability for this actually great platform. So really understanding like who you are, what you do, why you do what you do, and other revenue streams outside of just maybe products. I think that 10% of the market share is extremely aggressive, and that's an understatement for how aggressive that would be to get that traction, to get that buy-in. Knowing the competition that you have, I think, from some of my board work on like with Americans for Safe Access, like that's a 250,000 database of patients, doctors, recommenders, physicians. Like I think really look into like ASA, other kind of medical patient organizations to like get some more traction on this. I do see a lot of risk with like the HIPAA side, and I would love to be involved in something that is going to work with prescriptions in the future in the United States, but that's going to be, sadly, and still like Apodex, Sativex, GW pharmaceutical type products, standardized pharmaceutical drugs. The way that we're doing this now is compassionate use products, API. We do things in the US we get away with that we could not do with our international companies in terms of products. But I think that the market share for that is this big compared to like products, edibles, varieties, and strains, and specifically more than just a few cannabinoids or terpenes, like all of them with COAs and pushing labs to be a part of this. I think it'd be a really big thing. And my last comment, it's not a tacky one, but it's a big one. Like cannabis is kind of a panacea, and this fucking plant is amazing. And we just gotta like honor this plant, honor this opportunity. It's amazing what we get to do. And like keeping that medicine at the forefront, I think is incredible and revolutionary. And I honor companies like this, but like Shakespeare, he said, it's like, what's in a name? Well, MyCureAll, this is just my big kind of issue. It puts you instantly in the fanatical world of like, cannabis can cure everything, even though that's not, really the goal of this, but the name isn't indicative of like the service. And granted, you can make up a new name, Tilray, Leafly, something, Google. New names are great, but like this, I don't understand what it is based on its name. And I think that's going to take a long time to get ahead of, and could almost kind of hurt the medical community when you're trying to get their buy-on, when you're like, hey, MyCureAll. It's like cannabis isn't a cure-all. It does help with copious amounts of things. We have receptors in our body for it with our endocannabinoid systems, but those are kind of my main feedbacks. I wouldn't, even though I do invest into early stage companies and love to take positions on board and help nurture them, I think it's not that it's too early, it's just not focused enough at this point. But I think that with a little bit more time, energy, collaborations, just like, David and Jay had mentioned, like some of those in our world, it's not, collaboration is much more valuable than competition. So you got to know who your competition is, but how can you leverage to get in part of helping them do something they haven't done, or now more than ever is the time for strategic M&As, like no cash type deals, stock type deal. Like there's lots of options that you can get a lot bigger and stronger with not very much money and take massive market share quickly. But that's kind of my main feedback at this point. But really appreciate the presentation. It's gotten a lot better, and I think you're doing something great that the industry needs. It's just how you do it. A little bit more work is going to make it awesome.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you to all the panelists today, and really do appreciate everybody sticking with us a little bit over time today. Now for the audience participation and our judges voting as well. A pop-up screen will be coming up, or a pop-up on your screen rather, will be showing up momentarily for everyone to participate and vote on whether or not you would invest today in MyCureAll. While we're waiting for that to show up, if anybody has any other, there we go. So let's all take a moment and answer this poll. It reads, would you be interested in investing in MyCureAll? Yes, I want to invest. I have strong interest, but need to learn more, or not at this time. And then we'll go to our second question. Please rate the MyCureAll presentation. Did you find it great, good, or fair? Be honest. And certainly, how would you rate the overall Investor Hot Seat webinar? And don't forget to sign up for more. Please go ahead and lock in your votes. All right, thank you so much to everybody locking in those votes. I want to thank all our investor judges and certainly want to thank MyCureAll for jumping in the hot seat today. I certainly want to thank everybody in our audience again for joining us and waiting so patiently until we got started and continuing with us a little bit past our intended time. We would also want to remind our audience, you can review the investor pitch competition presentation and all the judges' questions and feedback that you saw today online at the cannabisinvestingforum.com's website. In addition, you will receive an email that will point you to that as well. Please make sure to mark your calendars for our next investor pitch contest, which will be taking place on August 20th, 2020. That is the next Investor Hot Seat. And then we've got a medical cannabis speaker and investor pitch competition on July 30th, brought to you by all of us here. Thank you so much for joining. And I want to thank everyone again and look forward to seeing you at our next pitch competition and our Investor Hot Seats. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, wear your masks, and goodbye for now.